Good morning, or whatever it is. I'm Doug, and here are 10 compelling but seldomly talked about reasons we need a complete and comprehensive housing revolution. Number 1. The housing crisis is spreading across the country. It is no longer just a problem for New York and California. It's happening all over, and if it hasn't hit your region yet, it eventually will. Many of the people moving to less expensive regions are flush with cash from selling their homes for top dollar in the more expensive regions they are leaving and can outbid most of the locals when looking to buy homes or find a rental in the less expensive regions they are moving to. Not only do they make the housing market in these less expensive regions much more competitive, but they drive up housing prices there also. Lower income people in these less expensive regions who can no longer afford housing in the area are forced to leave friends and family behind to relocate to even less expensive regions, then driving up housing prices in those regions. And the cycle goes around again. Number 2, as housing prices inflate in your area, so do general prices. As lower wealth people are forced to leave a region, they are replaced with higher wealth people who have more disposable cash. This results in an increase to the local available money supply. In other words, there's now more money floating around in the local economy, which then inflates general prices in the region. Now, if this correlation between the money supply and inflation is new to you, don't worry. We are going to get into this in depth in a subsequent video. Suffice it for now to say, this correlation has been well documented for centuries. This is why you hear about retirees and other people living on a fixed income, even those who own their homes outright and who have no mortgage, having to leave friends and family behind to relocate to regions where general prices are lower. Number 3, the solutions and strategies we've been attempting to address the housing crisis with for several decades now have failed miserably. All of these failed strategies have unfortunately been brainstormed from within the confines of the system. This seemingly permanent indoctrination has resulted in strategies that at best marginally address only the symptoms of our dysfunctional land and housing system. While arguments such as it's just a supply problem or employers need to pay workers a living wage incessantly go on and on, the real roots of our affordable housing crisis go on unhindered. Number 4, when we do get new supplies of housing, they aren't the supplies the market is in need of. Now, the organic purpose of a housing system is to house people. But the U.S. housing system has obliterated that organic purpose with the quest for profits and dreams of building wealth without having to work for it. By a long shot, the top priority of our housing system is profits and wealth building, with the investors, speculators, and financiers regarding the provision of shelter as little more than a cheeseburger. With the profit motive dominating new construction, we will never have the supply of necessity-based, income-appropriate homes the market so badly needs. As constructing expensive homes and remodeling average and lower-end homes to turn them into expensive homes is the surest way to maximize profits, the real needs of the housing market, adequate supplies of necessity-based and income-appropriate homes, go on unmet. Five, parents are having to work so much just to pay housing costs, they aren't able to spend adequate amounts of time raising their kids. Now, housing is the biggest monthly financial nut to crack for the largest number of people. But when it comes to keeping housing costs under control, we seem to have an attitude that says, well, that's just the way it is. There's nothing we can do about it. But in this era where time equals money, bringing housing costs down, which we can do, would mean having more time to do things like raise our kids, spending time with your family, the foundation of family values. But with our country's no-holds-barred version of capitalism, the almighty capitalist covenant forbids the sacrificing of real estate investors' deserved profits for something as inessential as parents having adequate time to spend with their children. But hey, we can at least don our shirts and ties and go on TV and talk about family values. Six, our housing system has laid waste to the ethos of our country. The national credo that an honest day's work entitles one to an adequate standard of living has been decimated. And to rub salt into workers' wounds, those investing in real estate are often afforded a high standard of living, not as a reward for contributing to society or for producing anything or putting meaningful time and energy into providing a legitimate service, but merely for hoarding land and housing they don't need for their own personal use in order to profiteer by taking advantage of laws of supply and demand and inflation in order to build wealth without having to work for it, all on the backs of those who are working and making real contributions to society and the economy. Seven, we can't effectively address wealth inequality without effectively addressing our dysfunctional, inequitable land and housing system. Adding even more salt to the wounds of the people working in the real economy, politicians continue to completely ignore inflating and hyperinflating land and housing costs, and instead believe it should be the burden of employers to keep paying employees more and more again, so employees can then pay those controlling land and housing more and more again, unquestioningly facilitating the massive transfer of wealth going from the employees and employers in the real economy to those in the asset class who are producing nothing while using the leverage of the vital resources they are hoarding to siphon off the fruits of others' labors. Eight, yes, what we have is feudalism. While it's not the exact same feudalism our ancestors were subjected to, this, the new feudalism, feudalism 2.0, does have the exact same underlying mechanism. That is, people controlling more land than is needed for their own personal use and then charging rents to those people in need of land. The only thing that has changed in this new feudalism is the players. Instead of feudalism via the nobility, the crown, or the vassals, it's now feudalism via private citizen and private corporation. Nine, capital investments for startup companies that have the potential to benefit society have been diverted to real estate investments, which typically produce little to nothing, all the while hoarding housing supplies and driving housing prices up. We are missing out on the contributions to society and the economy these startups would be making. We are missing out on the solutions to the plethora of pressing problems these startups would be bringing to market. And in return, we get higher and higher housing costs. Now, isn't that something? 10, we need to stop the housing bubble cycle. And I'm not talking about the housing bubble, I'm talking about stopping the housing bubble cycle, in which every 10 or 20 years or so, housing prices inflate to unsustainable levels, the bubble pops, average people get foreclosed on, wealthy investors and real estate corporations then buy up the foreclosures, and recession hits the entire economy. Then pretty soon, with land and housing now consolidated into the hands of fewer and fewer people, housing costs reinflate to prices that are higher than when the last bubble broke, and then the cycle goes around again. And as long as we continue to fail to address the deepest roots of our dysfunctional land and housing system, we, our kids, our grandkids, our great-grandkids, etc., will be endlessly subjected to this cycle. So anyways, welcome to the housing revolution. This is a video series that is going to break down the housing crisis like you've never seen before. We are going to extricate ourselves, break away from the incessant, ineffective, nearsighted arguments about how to solve the housing crisis, and we will examine the system from outside the system, from that vantage point above the system where we can look down and see all of the factors contributing to the housing crisis, including its deepest systemic roots that no one is talking about. We're going to learn some of the basic economic principles that are necessary to see what is going on behind the curtain, to comprehend the explosive reaction that occurs when we mix our unlimited feudalistic property laws with our hyperinflationary mortgage system. From there, we will talk about solutions, about what actions must be taken if we are to comprehensively transform our dysfunctional land and housing system into a system that effectively, equitably, and affordably houses everyone. Tomorrow's video will be an in-depth summary about the Housing Revolution series and how our failure to understand the deepest roots of the housing crisis is what enables our exploitative housing system to go on and on unchecked. So please share, lick the hype button, subscribe, and always hit the No Box Donations tab, because it really helps with the YouTube algorithm, blah, 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 blah. All right, and we're going to have some fun. All right, see you tomorrow. Over and out.